Welcome to our session today on Engage, the value of age-inclusive approaches in amplifying our research impacts. We're hoping today to help demonstrate how this fits the theme of the ARIS Summit for Research Impact and Public Engagement at the intersection of our future workforce. We have several members of our Engage team with us today sharing their age-inclusive approaches. In order of their appearance, we have Dr. Jennifer Margrett, Dr. Neil Charness, Dr. Teresa Wu, Dr. Jim Oliver, Dr. Derrick Rollins, and Dr. Diane Rover. I am your host today and your moderator, and I am Jessica Bell. And I'm happy, and we're all happy to be here with you today. Before we share more, we've set up some interactive polls and some questions. We would like you to open another browser or on your mobile device, go to slido.com. And at the top of the page there, you can enter the code 333940. You'll see it on the screen. I also put this in the chat. And our first question today, let me load that up, is what are the barriers to including aging adults in the workforce? So I'll give you just a moment here to get caught up with Slido so that you can enter your thoughts. And team members, if you would like to include that as well, you're more than welcome. So we have a few learning objectives today. We would like to share with you the role of technology in meeting challenges for the aging workforce. We also want to share some projects capitalizing on age-inclusive approaches, as well as highlight how broadening participation in the aging workforce can be incredibly valuable for not only your research, but also for this growing aging workforce. To begin, let me introduce my introducer today is Dr. Jennifer Margrett. She's the Associate Dean for Research, the College of Human Sciences at Iowa State University. And she'll be joining me to share about our Engage research and broadening participation. And that leads us to our second question today. So who do you find is more alike? A pair of 25-year-olds or a pair of 75-year-olds? And we'll review this after Dr. Margrett and I are done with our section. So let me introduce Engage, Engineering Technologies for Resilient Aging. As the number of adults age 65 and older dramatically increase, there's a growing unmet need for technologies and support as they continue to contribute to this workforce in the US. Engage is creating a new generation of technologies informed by behavioral and social sciences that proactively promote optimal aging. We accomplish this goal via a unique partnership, including several universities, and I will list them all: Iowa State University, Arizona State University, Florida State University, the University of California, Irvine, Florida A&M University, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of Michigan, University of Nebraska, Omaha, along with several diverse stakeholders that we have engaged across the US. So this work is being done and supported by the National Science Foundation and the Iowa State University's Nano Vaccine Institute, along with some support from the USDA NIFA. Dr. Margrett will now share with us some more information about our aging adult population.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessica, and good to be here with everyone. So we'll talk about aging adults and focusing on the workforce today. I think it's important that we set the context, so perhaps folks who are participating in the session or watching the recording may not be aware of the changing age demographics. So we used to think about the left-hand side as really an age pyramid, where there were fewer people surviving until older age compared to more people populating younger parts of the lifespan. As we're moving across time and looking at projections, we see on the right-hand side, the age pyramid is becoming more like a rectangle. And by 2035, it's anticipated that more Americans in the US will be over the age of 65 compared to those who are under 18. And as we think about this aging population, it's important to remember that diversity will increase as well. So I hope one of the themes that you take away from today, one of our learning objectives, was really the diversity of aging. And Jessica, if you kindly show that next slide, we're only going to see an increase in the aging population in terms of race and ethnicity. As we talk about today, there are many other ways in which adults differ, but this is an important cultural marker. And you see that we have this anticipated change, which will affect the workforce and how we're interacting with each other. And so an important impetus for really thinking about engaging older adults is perhaps, in addition to the social benefits, some other aspects related to supporting optimal adult development and aging. There's an economic benefit and perhaps cost. But the longevity economy really is expected to double by 2032. So AARP, and apologies if this is not copacetic with you, AARP considers aging adults 50 plus. That's when you start receiving the card and the benefits. In the US alone, there are about 111 million adults who are aged 50 plus. And really the longevity economy encompasses all the types of activities, services that folks want and prefer and need, as well as the indirect economic activity that that would generate. So this is very significant in terms of the US economy. And as we think about our work today, one of the foundational pieces of our work as an engaged team has really been thinking about the different contexts in which older adults, our partners, stakeholders live and work. So if we take a look on the right-hand side, we'll see this aging context. And really for all of us, this is highlighting, we're individuals, we operate, we live within relationships, so family, friends. Today we'll also talk about intergenerational relationships, community, and think about how important community is in supporting what adults want and need to do. Today, we'll also hit upon providers and other types of partners and think about societal implications related to the aging workforce.
Thank you, Dr. Margrett. So going back to our poll, a little question earlier, the response, the answer is to who is more alike is 25-year-olds. Can you put in the chat or unmute yourselves as to why you think this is the case? More ways to connect with each other, different opportunities and choices and constraints. Great. I agree. The more life you live, the more diverse your life becomes. Access to lots of information making their world smaller. I agree. Thank you, everybody. We will now transition over to another question. Actually, this is a series of questions. Let me get the quiz started here. So we have 4 questions, true or false. And in your Slido, if you go to slido.com and enter in that code that's on the screen, the last 50 years, world life expectancy at birth has increased by 25 years, true or false? Next question. Older adults are the fastest growing age group in the labor force. True or false? Two more questions. The fax machine was invented after the telephone. I admit I got this one wrong. True or false? And then one more final question. Internet access for older adults greatly increased during this 2019-2021 pandemic period. True or false? Thank you so very much for participating in that, and we will talk about our responses in a little bit. Let me introduce our next speakers. Dr. Neil Charness is the William G. Chase Professor of Psychology, a distinguished research professor and director of the Institute for Successful Longevity at Florida State University. With him is Dr. Teresa Wu, Professor of Industrial Engineering at the School of Computing, Informatics, Decision Systems Engineering at Arizona State University. Welcome to you both, and I will pass the mic over to Dr. Charness.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Okay, so I want to make people familiar with two important revolutions that have been taking place for quite some time now. I think I raised that point about the turn of the century. One of them is widespread population aging, and Jennifer's already talked a little bit about that in the United States. On the right, what you can see is estimated world life expectancy at birth by year from 1950 to 2020. So this includes all nations, not just the United States. And what you can see is an increase in life expectancy at birth of about 25 years in a relatively short 70-year period. It's what we call today the longevity dividend. We all, or many people around the world today, born today, can expect to live a quarter century longer than the people who came before them. That's one important revolution. Oh, can I just hit the second? The second is another one called rapid diffusion of technology. And what you can see at the bottom of that slide is a little table which shows how quickly technology was taken up. So if we look at the fax machine, which was invented in 1843, about 30 years before the wired telephone, until it was in about 50% of US businesses, took about 150 years. For the telephone to diffuse from its patent year, 44 years. For the microprocessor, 30 years. For the internet, which I take as a TCP/IP network, it took only 18 years before half of US households had internet. If I go to the next slide, so these are the two major revolutions. And I want to say a little bit about how they interface and do it within the context of the existing labor force. And in this particular slide on the right, what you can see is labor force participation rates for the years 1994 through 2014, and then in black, a projection to 2024. And if you look on the left-hand side of that slide, what you'll notice is that there's been very little change in labor force participation rates in the two youngest cohorts. It's gone up a little bit, or it's projected to go up a little bit after dropping in the 25 to 34-year-old group. It's basically stayed the same in 35 to 44. It's gone up a little bit in 45 to 54. An older worker is technically defined in the United States as someone over the age of 40 for the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. However, you can see massive increases in participation rates at the upper end of the age spectrum here. For 55 to 64-year-olds, skyrocketing. Even more so for 65 to 74-year-olds, and there's been a gradual but steady increase in 75-year-olds. In other words, our labor force is also aging, and the greatest growth groups are older age cohorts. Next slide. Okay, now, sadly, we had COVID-19, and what it did is differentially, and contrary to, for instance, the Great Recession that we experienced some years earlier, it hit the older part of the labor force extremely hard. What you can see is that the greatest decline was for the 65 plus group. These are data that Richard Johnson of the Urban Institute published fairly recently. And he speculates that unless our policy changes, older workers who left the labor force in large numbers may not rejoin unless we do a few things. One is make the workplace safer, root out ageism, and try to support older job hunters better than we have done traditionally. Next slide. Okay, so now where does technology come in. What I'm showing here are some data which indicate the changes over time. These are successive cross-sectional surveys from the Pew Foundation, Pew Internet and American Life research study. And you can see that at the birth of the internet, not quite the birth, but in the year 2000, the orange line, the yellow line rather, older adults lagged significantly at about 13% internet use, and the other age cohorts also fell along an age gradient. But over time, the two youngest cohorts are at 100%, and then data from released fairly recently show that for workers, people who are still in the workforce, for the most part, 50 to 64-year-olds, they went from about 90% used the internet in the last year to virtually 100%. I want you to contrast that, though, with the older cohorts. They didn't move at all. In other words, they were at 73% in 2019, before the pandemic started. They've gone up to 75%. That's within the margin of error, plus or minus 3% for these types of polls. Next slide. Okay, so what I've shown you are interesting trends with respect to technology adoption, how it's age sensitive, that there's an age digital divide. And I want to now introduce a bit of a framework to help us think about the role of technology in trying to meet the needs of our aging workforce. And the framework is, I call it PRAISE. It's the prevent, rehabilitate, augment, and substitute framework. And it really suggests that what we want to do, first of all, is prevent impairment. Prevent injury to workers is an important piece of that, so that people reach old age in the best possible shape. However, we know that impairments are going to arise, normatively speaking, for most of the population. In that case, we can consider technology has a role to rehabilitate someone. So for instance, if someone has a stroke or undergoes some other disease process that limits their reach or mobility, we can provide them with exercises. In fact, telerehabilitation is a fast-growing area today. However, sometimes a failing function can't be rehabilitated. Cognition might fall into this category. And there we want to augment, support a failing function. And you can see on the right shot from a Ford assembly line plant, where a worker, you can see on the left arm there, the worker is wearing an exoskeleton to help them carry out repetitive activities without having strain that might interfere with their ability to complete their job. Finally, in the case where something fails at too great an extent to augment that failing capability, you can substitute. That is, replace a failed function. On the left, you can see a Google car. It's an example of an autonomous vehicle. When somebody has a cognitive impairment that's too severe even for advanced driver assistance systems to help them drive safely, then you might want to substitute. Okay, I'm going to turn it over next to my colleague Teresa, who will talk a little bit about mobile technologies and their role and the role of AI.
Thank you, Neil. So you can see this slide is about smartphone. Jessica, can you turn back to the earlier slides? I want to make a little bit transition. This is an excellent framework Neil just proposed. It's a PRAS. And just now, Neil gave two examples about these two cars. One is Google, another is the car productions. That's tied to the A and the S. And indeed, when we finalized the slides, I decided to add one more picture. And now you can tell because Jessica already gave you the hint. Next slide is about smartphone. So you can see the additional added figure I had over there is 3 happy men really happily using their smartphones. Maybe they are talking to their caregivers, their family members. Maybe they are talking to their employees or employers. So now I'm going to get to the next slide, please, Jessica. Before we tap into this technology, I am an engineer by training, so I tend to use some use case to demonstrate how those technologies really playing a role for this aging workforce. It's kind of interesting. I'm looking back from the chat, from the very first Slido exercise, we get a feedback from Michelle saying age of 25, it's more ways to connect with each other. Age of 25 from Megan, she thinks this is access to a lot of information, making their world smaller. Indeed, thinking about the connection, thinking about, access a lot of information, it's all enabled by the technology. Smartphone is one technology. I want to point out here, look at this figure. You can see some similar trends presented by Neil earlier about those workforce. And this trend is showing the smartphone ownership. So I want you to say, all right, if you are thinking about 25 years old and look at the right-hand side of this figure, you will see for 65 plus, it's big jump about using smartphone. Apparently, for the aging population, the aging workforce, they are also use a lot of the smartphone, increasingly the ownership showing here to get connected, to get access to the information, maybe make their world also smaller. So that's the point I want to make. And before I get to the next use case studies, I want you to see using smartphone is one technology. It got to be really hand by hand with another type of technology, which is artificial intelligence, to bring the fidelity from the research into the reality, make the impacts. So next slide, please. So this is one example. As Neil, he already talked about the two examples of his frameworks, and now I'm tied to the very first element in his framework, that is our Rehabs. This is the collaboration we have with my dear colleague, Thurman. He is also our dear engaged member from day one. Thurman, what he is doing is really develop some sensing technologies for the aging population, not only the ones stay at home, but also the work in place. So that's really have a multiple roles. Looking in this special cohorts, we need to develop this technology, sensing technology. We think about it's going to be low cost, going to think about it's non-obstructive, think about that this is easy access and other things. What we are showing here is, you can see that in the middle part is a point of care. It's pretty small, this sensing technology connect to the internet. You can think about it's just a button, put on your shirt. So in that case, we are able to collect those information to do a number of things. How is this tied to the R from Neil's framework? You can think about one scenario is the people doing the rehab. Maybe they suffered a stroke. So we do want to monitor their walking pattern. That is the gait analysis. We want to really monitor that to do some predictions. One risk prediction will be the fall risk. So that's give you some idea of technology, and all of this is really collect from the sensor using the smartphone, connect to the network using the server to get to the next piece. What I want to mention the next piece is, take a look at the right-hand side. This is just a snapshot showing the data collect from the sensors through the smartphone to the servers. We are using our human naked eye. It's really hard for us to make any sense of this data. What is this telling me? How do I accurate using this data to do all these kind of predictions to help people to do the rehab and other things? And that's why I said sensing technology got to go hand by hand with another technology, artificial intelligence, to really make sense out of the data to help. Next slide, please. So what I'm showing here is the second technologies, artificial intelligence, and it tied to the P elements from Neil's framework, Chris. And the P in Neil's framework is prevention, but you can also rather to maybe extend into personalized precision prevention. So in this case, apparently AI play a very important role. Indeed, just over the weekend, one of my colleagues sent me the link. The US government launched this AI initiative, and the website just go live over the weekend. You can see this AI initiative, there are a number of important strategic pillars, and quite a number of them are tied to the aging workforce, tied to the audience here, including the education, training, applications in terms of energy, medicines. Because of time, I will not spend too much. I'm just showing on the right-hand side. This is also some ongoing work from my team using some deep learning AIs to really make sense of the data to do the health monitoring. So I will just stop here and maybe questions.
Yeah, are there any questions? So to go back, you can also put your questions in chat. Don't hesitate. To go back to our Slido true or false questions, I put the answers here. So what statement do you find surprising? And why do you find that surprising?
I was a little surprised that internet access did not increase during the pandemic. I perhaps can think of some reasons why. So limited access, I didn't perhaps have help or know how to engage, but that one was a bit surprising.
Megan says, I agree, that one was the most surprising to her as well. Yeah, got some head nods here. Thank you, everyone. So we'll go on now to sharing some projects that capitalize on age-inclusive approaches. We've already met Dr. Margrett, but I'd like to introduce Dr. Jim Oliver, our director of the Student Innovation Center here at Iowa State University. And the two of you will highlight a couple of these intergenerational projects that do capitalize on our age-inclusive approaches.
Thank you, Jessica. And to the point we were just talking about and a few other introductory remarks, we'll think about increased diversity within the aging population. So in this slide, it's just to capture, we've discussed a chronological age, so 50 or 40, according to some policy work. But when are we older? And how do we think of this group as a group? And is that really a fair assessment? Probably not. So going back to our slide where we asked the question about the two 25-year-olds compared to the two 75-year-olds, most folks agreed that the two 75-year-olds likely had some really different life patterns. They've made different choices, had different opportunities available to them, different constraints. And so as we become older, we do see that we have more maybe emphasis on individual differences. And as a group, just to note that the age span can go from 60 to over 100 years. That's actually a centenarian on the top right-hand side who's run marathons. Makes me quite jealous. So we've got individuals who are excelling at any age. We've got individuals who maybe are not quite as excelling at younger ages. The woman on the bottom right is one of my favorite stories. She came back to Iowa State University after 60 years to complete her undergraduate degree. And this was an important life goal. Her husband and family supported her. And so she was able to do that after being away from campus and education in that formal sense for 60 years. At the time, I had a neighbor of the same age. She didn't have the same interests, the same financial resources, the same physical, and perhaps even cognitive resources to do what Shirley Smith did. So just highlighting that within this, quote, older age group, and when we think about research impacts and engaging, just to be cognizant of different preferences, needs, different cohorts that are packed into that older age group. We certainly have differences in health and functional ability, technology and social media use and preferences, as we've just chatted about. So it's a lot when we think about this group, but a lot of opportunity. So when we look at this next slide, and I'll just highlight a couple of projects that we've been involved with at Iowa State. I know Neil, for example, has participated and led other of such events at his campus, but really the idea is to capitalize on multiple generations and think about how can we engage younger people to think about aging and how they can help us innovate. And importantly, we need to start with debunking myths. So that could be its own 60-minute conversation at least. But we need to make sure that everyone, all ages, really know about foundational components of aging, and even older adults themselves can debunk those myths. As we've talked about with the longevity economy, there's a lot of opportunity. This may not be an immediate choice or thought that younger folks may have in terms of engaging older adults, designing with older adults, but we definitely need to expose them to these opportunities. And so some examples we'll talk about, we've really tried to not only have coursework, but also internships, innovation, focus on entrepreneurship, this idea of co-designing. So working with older adults, working with that quote user to understand needs and preferences. Importantly, as our team demonstrates, we're focused on interdisciplinary connections. So Teresa mentioned she has a strong background and expertise in engineering. So that's a nice complement to other expertise on the team, like my own in social and behavioral research. And then when we're thinking about intergenerational opportunities, this is where we can really maximize for both the benefit of younger and older generations in some different ways. And so just an example from the class, we had a class on aging and entrepreneurship. The group on the right-hand side formed their own team that participated in NSF Corps. And that was a wonderful opportunity. And they really learned what's written on the top left. Know your customers, they're not all alike. The gentlemen on the bottom left are from Sardinia, Italy, one of the blue zones in the world. And even though they're brothers, even though they're close together in age, there are still differences. So it's important as we're designing, co-designing, as we're working, thinking about the aging workforce and ways in which we might interact. Every person is different, and so we want to keep that at the forefront. And we'll talk a little bit about a design charrette that we hosted. So the target really was to have folks, the undergraduate and graduate students from across the university, think about this hands-on challenge. So what would a smart home targeting 50 to 75-year-olds be like? What would be some sustainable solutions that would appeal to the homeowner's desires, capabilities, and would be a home that they could grow into? If we go to the next slide, we'll see that we had really good participation across campus. We had 36 graduate students and undergraduates representing 12 different majors who responded to this cold call email and just said, how would you like to participate in a weekend-long design charrette? We'll support you with supplies, with guest speakers, talking with older adults, so engaging those stakeholders. And they formed 9 teams that went on to design throughout this challenge. So this shows the culminating event where teams presented their prototypes, their ideas. It was really reflective of some of the concepts that we're talking about. Many incorporated intergenerational components. So how could you design not only a single smart home, but groups of smart homes within communities and really building on that neighborhood feel and opportunity. And they focused on both the interior and the exterior, thinking about whole person wellness and functioning, but what would be the social and behavioral considerations for aging adults. So some of the ideas related to furniture that was adaptable and could meet the needs, the physical needs of the homeowners. Thinking about lighting that would be responsive if folks were getting up in the middle of the night. So this was really some good thinking by these interdisciplinary teams. And overall, we had these really nice experiences where we can have intergenerational seminars, we can do design charrettes and challenges, really bringing young innovators and entrepreneurs, many of whom become passionate or come with that little bit of information, for example, about grandparents. And Jim will speak to this point in a minute. But really, how can we foster that passion? There's a lot of opportunity to have tremendous research impacts. We go back to that ecosystem that we outlined earlier in the workshop. So thinking about that person within their home, the partners, the relationships, the community support and engagement, all the way out to society for policy and different ways to engage as well. So look forward to some conversations and ideas about really how can we help intergenerational relationships and how can we help foster research impacts that would really speak to expanding markets and thinking about not only the longevity of individuals, but also products and services to support us as we move throughout the lifespan. And I believe Jim will discuss the Grandparent Project with us. Jim?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. Little background before I describe the project. I've been involved with the Engage team for several years now. And my research background is in human-computer interaction, augmented and virtual reality. But for the last couple of years, I've had the privilege of leading a bold new experiment here at Iowa State called the Student Innovation Center. And as part of that effort, we've been establishing some programming for extracurricular programming for students to be exposed to interdisciplinary teams, experiential learning, and really making a contribution to the community. So last fall, we were getting this off the ground, meeting with groups of students, and in the midst of COVID, this idea percolated to the top. So the students really expressed an interest in engaging their aging relatives in, and they were concerned with the isolation factor of COVID and just the challenges that put on everybody. So the goal was really to understand more about aging. So these are primarily freshmen and from a variety of different backgrounds, but the students really came up with this idea: how can we use some technologies to engage our elderly relatives and loved ones, and connect with them in some new way. So that motivated it. So you can go to the next slide. So again, my background is in this field, and we really thought that virtual reality had tremendous promise to immerse folks in different environments for this engagement. And the ideas, the application ideas were really diverse. So some were interested in showing their loved ones what life was like during the pandemic as a student on campus. Some wanted to go back to the family farm and show them what's going on during harvest time, something like that. So the idea we came upon was using 360 degree fully surround video. Those cameras have become much more accessible, very easy to use. And it's also very easy to deliver that content in a head-mounted display, as you see this woman using a head-mounted display, but it's really just a smartphone that is inserted into that device and provides a stereoscopic view of this video content. There's various interaction techniques you can employ, but we really wanted to keep the creation of the content fairly simple and the delivery of it very simple as well. So we launched the project in the late fall, and with COVID and supply chain issues, we had a little bit of a late start, but we did get rolling. So let's go to the next slide. So the team itself was about 12 undergraduate students, mostly freshmen from a variety of different backgrounds. We had several engineers, but a number of different folks from all over the university. Jennifer is a great resource in this project as well. And we had some technical resources from the center that I lead. We also have a tremendous relationship with a company here in Iowa that is specializes in virtual reality and immersion. And then we met the students, actually made the connection with Dr. Merchant at the McFarland Clinic. He's a physician, but independently had written a community grant to do almost the same thing. His focus was on capturing musical or theatrical performances as if you were in the ensemble, using these 360 cameras and with the target audience of older adults. And so we some of the students began working with Dr. Merchant. Some began roaming around campus and collecting data. So we're really just piloted the project this spring. And I have an example to show going forward. So go ahead and hit play. So here's a student view this is 360 video, but we're showing it in a browser here. So student zooming along in campus, there's our Student Innovation Center. And Jessica, if you can pan to the left or right, you can see that the video is indeed 360 video. So again, imagine a user could turn their head and look in any direction as they're flying around watching their grandson or loved one zoom through campus on his skateboard. But again, this could be, what's it like to go to a basketball game during COVID, but there's hardly any fans and synthetic, fan sounds going on. So the idea there was day in the life on campus during pandemic. And the students are really engaged and very excited about it. And this project will continue through the next academic year. And we expect a diversity of content and applications and engagement with the grandparents themselves. So we're pretty excited about how diverse this group is and how really self-motivated the whole project has become. So that's just an example of one of the projects that we stood up at the Student Innovation Center. So thank you.
Thank you, both Dr. Margrett and Dr. Oliver. We'll transition here because we've learned about the Engage projects and the role technology has in meeting the challenges aging adults face in the workforce, and highlighted a few of these intergenerational projects. But how do these come together to broaden participation in the aging workforce? So I welcome Dr. Derrick Rollins, a university professor in chemical and biological engineering, and Dr. Diane Rover, a university professor in the electrical and computer engineering, both here from Iowa State.
Thanks, Jessica. So you've seen many impacts of the aging workforce, many broader impacts, many examples. And so we are focusing on broadening participation here. And I'm going to let Derrick introduce that. And then we'll look more specifically at some of the needs and opportunities.
Okay, thanks, Diane. As we have seen, the demographic projections not only show an increase in the percent of older adults, but also in persons of color. This translates into what I would call compound diversity, a word I just made up. Since as a whole, this group is economically disadvantaged. In other words, in terms of just net worth, working beyond 65 is not a disproportionate choice, but a disproportionate necessity. As we have presented today, critical advancements in technology, science, and health will be key to the prosperity and well-being of our society on a global scale. Thus, it is paramount to act now to make great strides in broadening participation in STEM, inclusive of women, ethnic, racial, social groups, etc., including persons with disabilities, which will be all of us if we live long enough. Okay, Diane, back to you.
Next slide. And so we do see there are needs and opportunities, not only for older adults, but many others that are involved in supporting and caring for older adults. And so we see individual benefits of broadening participation, economic and workforce benefits, and societal benefits. And you've seen some of these as in the various slides that have been presented. But just in terms of individual benefits, we know that older adults in the workforce, as Derrick just mentioned, sometimes it's a necessity, and it has even beyond the financial benefits of it, it's linked with improved health and well-being. So there are individual benefits for broadening participation in the workforce for older adults. But we also know that it has other benefits as well to individuals, again, not only the older adults, but to other workers. And we know that the workplace is a better place when it's more inclusive and innovative. And that comes with the collaboration, and in this case, multi-generational collaboration when we bring and welcome older adults into the workforce and we support them in working with others. So many individual benefits, and then of course those individual benefits do build into other benefits. And we've already addressed some of the economic and workforce benefits. And some of those economic benefits simply come from having a competitive advantage with this multi-generational mixed age workforce. And we know that when we have diverse teams lead to more innovation, more competitive for those companies. And as we've also noted, we want full participation across all age groups for the many benefits that brings, and that not only to individuals, but really just to the workforce needs that we have in the nation. And then we also referred to the longevity economy, and part of that longevity economy is that our older adults are consumers, and as a result, by serving them, we are creating new products and services, and that also is helping our economy. And then that does build into some of the other societal benefits of broadening participation, not only for older adults in the workforce, but it does have a ripple effect of broadening participation of other groups at other ages, but also other groups that are underrepresented, minoritized in the STEM workforce. And so we know that we want to go beyond just STEM work, and we want to say STEM work that helps people. So it's not just the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math, but it's the people side of STEM. And we've seen that in this presentation, where once we get to the people side, we bring others in, and often that social value of the STEM work is of special interest to students from minoritized background, to women students. And so we can bring them more fully into STEM study and careers by emphasizing these kinds of the support that we're providing for aging adults. And so we really are addressing social problems that are serving families and communities. That has a benefit. And one other effect would be that, as research has shown, that women do serve as primary caregivers of aging parents, that by supporting an aging workforce, older adults in the aging workforce, we're also supporting women and broadening participation of them in the workforce in general, but hopefully in the STEM workplace as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rollins, Dr. Rover. So we have a few minutes here as we want to, we're hoping that you have gotten some takeaways today, that diversity increases as we age, that technologies can provide support as we develop and age and continue in the workforce, and that engaging multiple generations can be easy and it can be effective, both to your projects and to your broader impacts. So we want to open this up for a little discussion. We hope we've given you some insights into how including aging adults in your broader impacts can help align with all these 9 broader impact criterion highlighted by the NSF. We as a group here looked at these closely, and we feel that we can, as Dr. Rover just highlighted, impact all of these different broader impacts criterion outlined. So given what we've talked about, the barriers, the technologies, the intergenerational opportunities, we have a couple of questions for you. First one is, what do you see as opportunities related to including aging adults in the workforce? We started out asking you about barriers, but now we want to know what you think about the opportunities. And then how do you tie these to broader impacts?
I would say that, one of the greatest values to keeping older adults in the workforce is just their institutional knowledge, right? Their historical point of view on where things were. And if I saw this a little bit with as my father worked at the same manufacturing company for almost 40 years. He was one of the young guys when he started, but they were all roughly the same age. So the turnover was really quick, and it didn't give the younger guys coming in enough time to really understand like all of the little, idiosyncrasies that involved in their position. And like if an old foundry closed, they didn't understand the process of physically going and getting parts and how to catalog those and make sure, his factory got all of those things. So if there isn't like a plan for, retirement and passing that knowledge on in a manner that is actually going to be sustained, I think that that's a detriment, and we're going to make the same mistakes again.
Not going to argue there.
That's actually a critical challenge for a large manufacturer I've worked with, that the median age of their factory floor workers was 56. And they had big gaps in their demographics because of recessions or whatnot. But that capturing that institutional knowledge and somehow transferring it to the next generation is a huge challenge for them. So the longer we can keep those people active, the more productive that company is going to be.
Yeah, I was going to chime in on that too. That's exactly right. And it's particularly true in some industries, even more than others. Power industry is one where about 20 years ago, there was a movement to start what was called knowledge engineering, which is finding a formal way to extract the implicit and explicit knowledge that some of the older workers had with respect to particularly the machinery, because in many cases plants are just run until you can't run them anymore, and keeping them going added to the company's bottom line. And so having that institutional knowledge extracted, and there were a variety of methodologies that were being introduced, was a very important topic at least 20 years ago.
And I think just the value of teaming, that we see our early, like in my field of engineering, we see early career engineers go out and they're working on very complex systems. And so this does go back to knowledge and so on, but just the mentoring of this multi-generational workforce, and that what you can learn from one another and with one another, and how much, we'll just collectively be able to design more innovative systems, solve more complex problems. And it comes from that team and the diversity of the team, and that we're really missing out when somebody might be leaving the workforce prematurely for the various reasons.
Michelle, I saw that you had a question or a comment.
So I'm kind of thinking about this. So I'm from the University of Arizona, and we have a very large population of Hispanic students, Native American students. And I'm thinking how, I'm sorry, I sort of have unformed thoughts here, so I'm kind of thinking out loud, but how this would be a really valuable perspective for, say, first generation students who are really still connected to their families and their communities. And we realize how, like, when the student comes to college, like, their family comes with them, not physically, but like there's that strong pull and multi-generational family members. And if we can offer them ways to think about what they may be doing in their STEM fields and how it impacts, just sort of beyond, oh, what is that next cell phone going to look like, or the next whatever, that it really is impacting a person's life who looks like their grandmother or their great uncle or something like that. I think that could be really, really powerful. And I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking through that in my head and what that might look like and where that might be realized in our campus.
One of the things that this team has explored is the concept of personas, and having a persona that represents your grandparents or your great aunt or your mother or your neighbor that's in a wheelchair that you help out now and then, those kinds of things. So yeah.
And also just this idea of co-creation, I think that's I think that's missing and would be a really important piece for some of our students that are still like very connected to their communities and can't figure out like, gee, can I still be connected to my community and go into STEM, or do I need to choose some other field?
Mhm.
You know, we don't often explore this perspective.
So Michelle, do you have some ideas for how to actually get that, help make that connection? Because I think that's really important. You know, you've hit it there in terms of that aspect of getting some students involved.
Yeah, actually, so we have a really fabulous program on campus, the Arizona Science, Engineering, and Mathematics Scholars for first generation students from low income backgrounds, and transfer students. And we do have a large percentage of students of color. And they have workshops in there. I think just starting off with students to talk about this and to explore this themselves. But then there's also, we have mentors from the different STEM fields who work with these students. And I think just having discussions would be a start for us, but institutionalizing, I would love to have conversations with the engineering department and see where might this fit in, in design or something.
Yeah.
So I hate to do this. It sounds like a very productive conversation, but we are wrapping up in our time. Michelle, I'm going to go through these little things here quick. If you have any more questions or you'd like to engage with us, please feel free to send us an email at engage@iastate.edu. And I'd be happy to connect you, Michelle, if you do so choose to email. I'd be happy to connect you with anyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this beneficial. We will put the slides on the platform shortly after this session. So thank you everyone for joining us.